Welcome to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Good evening. I'm your host, Buford Terra, and with me tonight we have CJ, who is active in the North Houston NORML and Women's Alliance, and we have the Hermanator, who's going to tell us about his radio show.
Yes, sir.
But before we get to that, there are some news stories of particular interest to people in Texas that I think we need to at least pay attention to. One of them is the governor and some members of the legislature have proposed a new law that is just totally outrageous. Not only is it outrageous, it would be very expensive in terms of implementation. It would be discriminatory. It would be ineffective. It would be almost certainly unconstitutional. And it would solve a problem that doesn't even exist. What the governor is advocating is that all recipients of federal benefit, of state benefits, particularly subsistence allowance, unemployment benefits, would have to be drug tested before they could receive benefits. And if they flunked the drug test, they would lose benefits for 6 months or a year. Now, the problem is there's not a problem there to be solved. In Florida, which is the only state that has tried a foolish thing like this, the number of positive tests among those applying for benefits were only about a fifth as many as the people in the general population that use drugs. Normally speaking, about 5% of the population use illegal drugs of one kind or another. And when Florida tested benefits applicants, they were only getting about 1% positive results. Now, that's one problem. There's nobody out there that this really applies to. The second problem is it's horribly expensive. Most of the drug testing out there cost about $40 per test to administer. And if you're getting 1% positive results, that means that each drug user that you possibly suspect is going to cost about $4,000. That's pretty expensive testing. And the other real problem that comes along with it is that a lot of the people that receive benefits receive them indirectly, in that if you take, for instance, a single parent who applies for benefits, those benefits provide shelter, food, and often medical care for the minor children living at home. So this is the case where if that single parent were to test positive for drugs, the people that would actually suffer because of the cutoff of benefits would be the kids. And that's just simply not fair. And when we get right down to it, the Florida law was tested in the federal courts, and the federal court held that it was unconstitutional because it was so arbitrary and unfair, and that it violated due process because it had no real government purpose behind it. So this is a case where it looks like the state legislature is thinking about doing something that's useless, expensive, discriminatory, hurts kids and disabled people, and they're doing it just so they can get a few feel-good headlines. So this is definitely one you want to talk to your elected representatives about.
Right, and specifically you need to talk about the expense.
Yeah.
Because that's really where this law really fails as to the purpose of what it's supposed to do. A couple years back, there was a school district, when the hoopla about steroids first came out, the school district implemented basically this testing of all its athletes. And those tests were about $300 a pop per student. Well, after they spent almost $200,000 testing the student body for the athletes, they discovered, just like you said, only 1% of the athletes actually tested positive for steroids.
Yeah, it's my understanding that virtually every school district in the state has quit doing that.
Yeah,
now.
They quit because of the expense, exactly.
And they weren't finding anybody.
Right. When you only have 1% people, you know, that get busted, the expense is just, it's not worth it.
Yeah. And I don't have the figures here, but my gut reaction, looking both at Florida and looking at Texas, is that if this were put into effect, the impact would disproportionately hit minority members.
Oh, yes.
So it's just every way you look at it, this is a horrible law to even suggest. And the other one was a major story in the Houston Chronicle this morning. And this is the problem with staffing at the state prison system. State prison guard salaries are low. The starting salary is about $28,000 a year, and the maximum after 7 years is $38,000. And if we look nationwide, the median household income across the country is now about $48,000. So these are really low wages. And the result has been that large numbers of the state prisons are anywhere from 20 to 30% or more understaffed. And the understaffing causes really severe health and safety problems, both to the inmates and to the rest of the staff there.
Right.
And, you know, you can't just lock people up and forget about them. Once you've locked them in a cage, then you have assumed the responsibility to treat them humanly, if not luxuriously. And Texas has had troubles with prison population and overcrowding in prisons for a long time. We were under federal court orders because of it for a decade or so. Under Governor Ann Richards, we at least started moving a lot of people from prisons into drug rehabilitation, other kinds of therapy, alternatives to prison. Yet we don't seem to learn. We've let the places fill up again and get overcrowded. My own personal feeling is that the best way to handle this is not to dump a bunch more tax money into bigger prisons and more guards. But if we were to simply change the law and remove prison sentence type laws against simple drug offenses, that we could sure solve a lot of that problem right there.
Well, you're already seeing it in Colorado. In Washington with the passing of the legalization of marijuana. The people that were busted, they're getting all their cases thrown out.
District attorneys all over both states have already dismissed most of their pending possession.
And I believe they're already starting to look at some of the cases that the people were actually busted to see if they can actually release some people. You do that here, the same kind of circumstances, and believe it or not, you're going to find yourself with prisons that...
Well, most of the effect there would be at the county jail level rather than the state prisons, but simple marijuana sales, for instance, still sends a lot of people to prison.
Right.
And the third state story that's been bothering me, and this one is now several weeks old, but it keeps unfolding. The Department of Public Safety, the Highway Patrol, patrols along the Rio Grande border with Mexico in helicopters. And there was an incident a few weeks ago in which one of their helicopters started tracking a pickup that was running away from them. The back end of the pickup was covered by a tarp. The DPS people said they thought it was a drug smuggler trying to get away from them. So the guy in the helicopter shot at the truck, caused a wreck, killed some people. They weren't smuggling drugs, they were smuggling people. Let's see what our caller has to say. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah. As far as taking a UA
Yes.
for government, or let's just say state, like, I don't know, what is it, SNAP?
Well, I don't know if it includes SNAP, but it was several of the benefits programs.
Well, as far as food stamps.
Yeah.
Now, I can guarantee you, in Orange, Texas, everybody that gets them, they pay 50 cents on the dollar to either get cash or to buy crack. Now,
I doubt that you can guarantee that. What's your source of your information?
That. I mean, I'm sorry. I can guarantee it.
Well, go ahead with what your comment is.
Well, my point is, I don't know how they would, there's ways of getting around the system, so it'd have to be, a come in, and I understand maybe a drug test might cost $30 a doing, I guess. Now, I've been there. I've been the bad guy on the side of that, but yet I've also been the good guy on the side of it, and I've seen how people that want to buy, say, crack or coke, I'm not talking about weed, but it's mostly about mainly crack, coke, or pills. Okay. And they will actually give their cards out to the dope man.
Okay, now, a few people may do that.
No, I tell you what, Orange, Texas is only so big, and out of everybody that I know that's on them, I can for certain tell you that, say I know 20 people that are on them, 18 of them
Okay.
are not doing what they're supposed to do. Now, I do realize that there's people that honestly do need them, man, and I'm not trying, because some people do, I've worked my butt off, but yet I feel like there's people out there taking advantage.
Okay,
and I know for a fact that 20, 18 at least are doing it.
Okay, thank you for your comment. I think this kind of illustrates one of the problems that we have in trying to talk about these issues. So,
misinformation.
And I think he's probably honest in what he's telling us. And it's quite possible from what he was hinting about from his own background, that of his circle of acquaintances, there may be a high level of drug use. But I don't think he's got any basis to extend that to cover even the whole city of Orange, let alone the whole state of Texas.
Right.
When mankind started out, we ran around in small groups of about 20 people, just like chimpanzees do. And our brain is still wired to think about the world we live in as being that small group of 20 or 30 people. So it's awfully hard to get out of the habit of thinking what I see in the people sitting at the table applies to everyone in the whole world.
And people usually try to congregate in the same kind of groups.
Yeah.
So if this individual is in a neighborhood where everybody is doing crack or cocaine, then that's all he's going to know.
Well, I might also add that he's talking about being in Orange, which is primarily an industrial city, with the port and petrochemicals and a few other things. And this is the kind of industry and the kind of place where workers tend to use a lot more stimulants than you find in the more sedentary population. We have another caller. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, same guy again.
Okay, well, we could like your comments and we'll talk to you later. Thank you. Okay, as we were talking earlier about the DPS shooting the pickup, we'll take a break and come back. That's a good thing to take a break on, with a helicopter in the air shooting at a speeding pickup.
With drug war black market sales fueling violence, it's time to take the profit motive out of marijuana prohibition and regulate marijuana like alcohol. Remember prohibition? It still doesn't work. Al Capone didn't shoot people because he was drunk. The cartels don't kill people because they are high. To find out what you can do to help change the laws against marijuana, visit HoustonNORML.org. We meet on the third Thursday of every month. That's HoustonNORML.org. Normal rock!
Some brilliant entrepreneurs came up with the idea of blocking the endocannabinoids in our body to create a new diet drug. The theory being, if cannabis gives people the munchies, then blocking the endocannabinoids would make them lose their appetites. The drug they developed, Ramonabant, did indeed reduce appetite by blocking the endocannabinoid receptors. But data from clinical trials showed that Ramonabant users suffered depression, anxiety, increased the rate of subjects given a placebo.
Well, Sanofi-Aventis, the company that had developed and was marketing this agent, did not study people with a history of psychiatric illness or depression before they applied for approval. That was probably a mistake. The EMA did approve it, and the drug's been on the market in Europe for a year and a half by now. And I've sort of said, if there was any real problem with this that was more than just theoretical, we would know. Well, it turns out we do know. And they've suggested now that the risk for this agent outweighs the benefit.
In one study, there were 5 suicides among Ramonabant users. Feel euphoric or, when blocked, depressed. Ramonabant was finally withdrawn from the market in 2008. Researchers at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas reported that mice on Ramonabant developed potentially cancerous polyps at a far higher rate than controls, confirming that endocannabinoids are not only mood regulators, but tumor regulators as well.
Hi there, I'm Scuba Bob. You're watching Drugs, Crimes, and Politics on Houston Media Source.
Welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics, and we've been talking about the shooting of suspected drug smugglers from DPS helicopters. You know, I'm just not sure whether simply running from arrest down a backwoods dirt road where you're not jeopardizing any other traffic or any people around it, whether it wouldn't be better law enforcement to simply let that guy go and figure you'll catch him doing something else later. I mean, whether he's smuggling drugs or whether he's smuggling people, that's not a capital offense. If you can't execute him after you convict him, why should you be able to kill him before he's even arrested?
Right.
And aren't there other options to actually having to shoot somebody?
Well, sure. Like, I mean, they could have very easily called and had another car come in from the other end of that same road and block the road.
Are there mechanisms that you can use to disable electronics on cars?
None that I know of that really work that well, especially. But, you know, I don't care who you are, you're not going to be that good a sharpshooter from a helicopter in rough air close to the ground.
Right.
So it's just a place where you've got police acting in an unnecessarily dangerous fashion where there is no public emergency necessitating that they take that kind of action.
And that comes up with what the police now are thinking of doing with the drones.
Yeah.
You know, when you have drones flying out there and you don't have an actual person in the little manned aircraft, and they're looking at vehicles like that, there's going to be mistakes happening all the time.
Well, at least from what they're planning so far, those drones will not be armed. They're not like the predators with bombs that we're using in the Mideast. They're strictly surveillance, but even so, if one of them crashes, they're big enough that they could hurt someone. They could run into another airplane. There's no way airplanes could detect them. And you know, there's another side to that story. When I was much, much younger, there were quite a few stories of drug smugglers at that time that would get hobbyist-type radio-controlled airplanes. These were big enough to carry a kilo or two of coke.
Mm-hmm.
They could launch one on the Mexican side of the river, fly it across the river, and land it in a farm field on the other side, where someone would pick it up and take it to town and just leave the plane behind. And these were so low and quiet that an observer on the ground a half mile away couldn't see them. They're too small and too low to show up on radar. So it was a fairly secure smuggling method. And I got to thinking that if a police force can buy a surveillance drone for a few $1,000s, there's nothing to keep a cartel from buying a drone for a few $1,000s and use it for smuggling. And sure enough, what we end up with Star Wars with drone against drone.
I can see that happening very easily.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your radio show.
My radio show is going to be called Polar Effect, and it comes on Houston, localifehouston.com. Yeah. And starts this Friday from 3:30 to 5:30. It's going to be a combination of local metal and also community activism. We're going to put a little bit of focus on what's going on in society, what's happening with different issues. And this Friday, we're actually having the part of the Sands Blockade coming on to describe what's going on with those protests.
Okay.
We also are going to dedicate a little 420 moment every show.
Okay.
So that way we can have a little bit of normal in our day.
That's like bringing back Outlaw Dave from local radio several years ago.
Right.
He had a 420 every afternoon.
Yes, sir.
From the shirt, it looks like you're active in some of the local metal people.
Yes, sir. I do a lot of work with a lot of heavy metal bands. Yeah. And I also do a lot of work with NORML and with different, like I said, different community activism. Okay.
And notice CJ provided us with some NORML artwork for the studio tonight. So it's nice to see that it's active. And speaking of CJ, your work with NORML and the Women's Alliance, what are some of the things you're involved in?
This month we are going to have a banner drop out at 529 and Highway 6.
Okay, tell me what that is.
We're pretty much going to be holding signs up so people can see that we're out there. Okay. A lot of people don't know what NORML is, National Organization for the Reformation of Marijuana Law, and they don't know that there is an organization out there, local, that can push the truth, spread the knowledge out there.
Well, let me interrupt here, because I've known about NORML forever, and I've been dealing with, in one way or another, Houston NORML for some time, but tonight was the first time I had heard of a North Houston NORML.
That's pretty neat.
You mean there are two of us now?
Yeah, Dante and Jenny, I hope I'm saying their last name right, Carrillo, started a North Houston NORML. Okay. It's in the Cypress, Katy area. I don't think there's been a lot of exposure for them yet, but that's another thing that I'm trying to help out with, is getting people out in Cypress, the 290 West area, to get a little more involved. Also, just to get the name out there. A lot of people that I talk with come back with, they don't want to be associated with something that is considered extreme, or could possibly somehow down the line, you know, through their boss, somehow seeing them at an event, them getting fired. And I want to change the conception that people have of people who support NORML and marijuana users. It's not the evil marijuana that it used to be. The myths and the lies and the hearsay that we've heard throughout the generations.
It never was that evil.
No, never. It's just, you know, people continue to say certain things, and they get melted into people's brains, and it's hard to change that. And that's what I'm trying to do. Is we have a lot of people in our community that are marijuana users, and some that even aren't. That support NORML.
And I'm one of those people that support NORML, and yet I'm allergic to marijuana.
Okay.
So just because I'm allergic to marijuana does not mean that I don't believe that marijuana should be legal. I totally support it.
Well, that's like most of my position is that I think that prohibition laws in general do not work, cannot work. And the evil they create in society is much, much worse than anything they try to prevent. And when I talk about prohibition laws, I'm not just talking about alcohol prohibition or drug prohibition. I mean, let's face it, gambling prohibition laws, most of the states have gotten rid of most of them now. I mean, it takes what? 2 hours to drive to a casino from here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. A lot of places have gotten rid of prostitution laws, which are a form of prohibition. And frankly, the sex industry is probably safer, cleaner, causes less disease and less crime in Europe or Nevada than it does in Texas or New York. And I would frankly say that right now our immigration laws are a prohibition law and also causing a lot of evils. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
How you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you? Do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I'd like to hear you discuss the myth that marijuana leads to harder drugs. If you use or smoke pot, that you're going to end up doing heroin or cocaine abuse or something like that. I know it's a myth, but I just like to hear your point of view on it.
Okay, we can sure do that. Either of you want to start it out?
Well, most people tend to think of it as a gateway drug, which it's not. If anything, alcohol is more of the gateway drug than anything else. And people that fall into that myth, they actually start believing in it, and like I said, alcohol is the one that usually tends to lower people's inhibitions, and when you lower your inhibition, that's when you start using other things.
Well, the president asked the Institute of Medicine, the big federal medical research bureau, to look into the issue, and they published a report in 1995, and they clearly said that marijuana is not a gateway drug. Marijuana use does not lead to other drug use. And they said marijuana's being illegal is a stepping stone because it means that people who use marijuana are forced to go and deal with criminals to get it, the same criminals that might also be selling cocaine or heroin, and they get in the habit of doing criminal acts, so that it's the fact that they've been pushed into illegal commerce that causes the use, not the marijuana. And there's also some really interesting numbers here. Probably, and I'm not sure how it is now because of what's happened with pain medication in the past 15 years or so, but at one time, almost all of the heroin users also used marijuana at one time or another. But the flip side of that coin is that over 90% of the marijuana users never used heroin. And when they look at ages, both tobacco and alcohol use, especially about age 9, 10, or 11, was a much stronger predictor of later hard drug use than marijuana is. We have another caller. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment about a gateway drug.
Okay.
I tell you that I remember I first used marijuana, and the very first thing I did after that was acid. Tell me how that is not a gateway drug.
Okay. I would nearly bet you probably got them both from the same place. You probably did them both with the same circle of friends. And acid, acid, I'm not sure that in any real sense can even be called a dangerous drug.
No.
It's not addictive. It's not habit forming in any way. It gives you a temporary kind of out-of-body hallucination experience. But it's not the kind of thing that shows up. And even then, he's telling us correlation, not causation. Just because two things happen together does not mean that one of them has caused the other. We need to take another break, and then we'll come back and talk some more.
The whole idea of a drug-free America and zero tolerance really doesn't make much sense, does it? So it does make sense, however, to find ways to reduce the harms associated with drugs. And that's what I want to talk about.
Better start thinking about whether it is really laws that make the difference on whether people use drugs or not.
Al Capone didn't shoot people because he was intoxicated.
Right, exactly.
Those people are not fighting over drugs, they're fighting over money.
Drug laws have no basis in science. Drug laws are based on politics and money.
So there's this unholy symbiosis between, on the one hand, those who are selling illegal drugs, the drug lords, if you will, and on the other side, the drug warriors.
War on drugs isn't working, and that, if anything, it's just making what we call the drug problem a lot worse.
I'm not ready yet, please stop. Стоп, сказал, дебил, блин. Добрый день. My name is Igor, and I'm a businessman from Moscow. Long time ago, when me and my friends from KGB, we served our motherland in Afghanistan in early 80s. We did not expect that the lost war will bring us new wonderful business opportunity, the heroin trade. Last time, I watched TV with my mother, and the United Nations officials said that Russia is #1 consumer of heroin in the world, with an estimated 2.5 million users. You know, we traffickers, we make billions of dollars from selling drug to them. And then my mother told me, Igorechek, my dearest son, you will be infinitely grateful to the United Nations for keeping this market illegal. Otherwise, we would never buy that nice Renaissance palace in Venice last summer. Nice old woman, wise, and with a good sense of humor. But that TV also said that some Western bastards trying to convince my government to introduce methadone to treat addicts with this substitute drug. And here, I absolutely agree with my ex-comrade from KGB, Господин Ivanov, who is, by the way, the head of Federal Anti-Narcotic Agency. And he said, no way to let methadone in this country. And he means it. Otherwise, how would we buy gas for our yachts if not selling drugs to those junkies? Thank you, United Nations. Спасибо, Объединенные Нации. Спасибо за prohibition.
Hi, I'm Ethan Nadelman, the founder and executive director of the Drug Policy Alliance. You're watching Drugs, Crimes, and Politics. Hope you enjoy it.
Well, welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. I'm Buford Terrell, and with me we have Herman and CJ. We've been talking a little bit about everything, and one thing we really haven't touched on, which is probably the big news of the month, were the legalization votes in Colorado and Washington State.
Yes, sir.
What have you all been hearing about those votes around the people you know or hear from?
Well, one of the things that a friend in Colorado shared with me right off the bat was something called TABOR, Taxpayers' Bill of Rights or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's holding up apparently the legislation from actually being enacted.
Yeah.
There's some kind of tax stipulation on it that like the first $40 million of the tax that comes in goes to the education system.
Yeah.
And something about...
oh, I think I heard some. They've got another constitutional provision that requires equal taxation or equal application of...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those
are the kinds of little messes that'll have to be worked out.
Really. But apparently the voters are going to have to vote on it, so the same people who voted for legalization are going to be still, you know, in favor of that. Hoping, because if that's the only thing that's holding it up.
Well, I heard one of the things also is the commercialism.
Yeah.
That they're trying to figure out how to approach the commercialism of marijuana, and so, you know, that right there is something that they're not right now, because hasn't been done yet. The stipulations as to what is going to be taxed and what is, you know, where it's going to be sold and so on. They're trying to figure out how to go about it, and that right there is hopefully Colorado and Washington can figure all those problems out. So, because once that becomes a mainstay, the taxes that are going to be collected on that, I guarantee you other states are going to see the benefits, and they're going to want to say, okay, let's use Colorado and Washington as a model to go ahead and legalize it.
Two things there. At least 5 states have already, within this last month, introduced legalization legislation of their own. Whether any of them will pass this year, I don't know. But the other thing, and here I'm speaking from more years' experience as a lawyer than I'd care to think about, that once you get the market established, once you've got visible buyers and sellers, then it doesn't take very long to work the details out. If we were to sit down right now, and if we were to get the 6 smartest, most knowledgeable people in running businesses in the whole world around a table, they could come out with more problems and what ifs and, oh, we don't want this to happen, or what if so, and they would come up with a mess that never could work in practice. But if you just said, okay, let's start it out. When problems come up, let's deal with them. Let's work with what really is. Then in a fairly short period of time, you've got a workable system. And the other side to it is we're dealing with marijuana here, not nitroglycerin.
Right. Well, one of the things that I was encouraged is also Virginia is trying to pass a hemp law.
Yeah.
They're wanting to go ahead and start producing crops, you know, to legalize hemp.
Yeah.
And to me, that's another stepping stone. You legalize hemp, eventually you're going to legalize marijuana.
For those watching that don't know, the hemp plant is exactly the same plant as marijuana,
right?
Except it has a much, much, much lower level of THC, the main active ingredient. You can't get high by smoking hemp.
Right.
It's used for fiber to make clothing and paper. The Declaration of Independence was printed on hemp paper. Until the 1930s, all of our money was printed on hemp paper. It's makes pretty good food. If you go into any health food store, you'll find hemp seed products and hemp oil products. Hemp oil is the basis of a lot of cosmetics now.
And they're finding that it also fights cancer.
That I'm willing to wait on a little bit, but there are some studies that indicate it pretty strongly. But it makes a pretty good agricultural crop. And it doesn't take much water. It takes very, very little tillage or pesticides. It doesn't take much fertilizer. And frankly, if you look at the state of agriculture in Texas, always been one of the state's biggest industries. Right now, if you read the local paper, rice farmers are all crying because it looks like a lot of their water supply has been cut off. I'm from West Texas, where cotton was the big crop and close to the wheat belt. These droughts we've been having are making these guys really suffer a lot. You know, hemp could make a salvation for Texas agriculture because it uses a whole lot less water than cotton or rice, either one.
And that's the idea behind the Virginia law.
Yeah.
The tobacco farmers, with all the taxes that are on the tobacco and less and less people using tobacco, they need another product to be able to sell. And so that's why they're introducing legislation to start maybe producing hemp. Because the tobacco farmers are basically saying we're producing a crop that is no longer viable.
Well, the ridiculous thing is that you can walk in any health food store in the city and buy hemp products. There are lots of shops in Houston that sell hemp clothing. Yet the hemp we use has to be imported from Canada, Western Europe, and even China, because, and this is what gets me, Congress has not changed the federal law to differentiate between marijuana and hemp, because the DEA goes in running their hands and saying, oh, we're so dumb we can't look and tell the difference between a marijuana plant and a hemp plant.
And that's the truth.
No, it's not the truth.
Well, that's what they used for
yeah, but the way they're planted and grown as a crop,
right?
You can tell the difference between a hemp farm and a marijuana farm from an airplane. I mean, they're not that similar in the way they're grown. But yeah, hemp's another major issue here. But one thing that I've noticed coming out of this, one prediction I saw just today is that they're predicting that probably by the end of next year, the price of good quality marijuana in Colorado will be $75 an ounce or less, compared to the $200 to $300 an ounce it's bringing now.
Right.
And guess what that does to the Mexican cartels?
It's not a business.
And we'll take another break and come back.
Cool.
This is Dean Becker marker of the Drug Truth Network. I urge you to listen to our programs on KPFT Radio, that's 90.1 FM in Houston, and available on the net at drugtruth.net. And the reasons why: there is no truth, no justice, no logic, no scientific fact, no moral clarity, no reason whatsoever for this drug war to continue. And it's going to take your involvement, and I urge you to become part of that solution.
It's time to play Name That Drug by its side effects. Shortness of breath, slow heartbeat, weight gain, fatigue, hypotension, dizziness may mask the symptoms of low blood sugar. Stopping therapy abruptly has led to chest pain and heart attacks. Time's up. Talk about dependence. The answer from GlaxoSmithKline: Coreg for hypertension, heart failure, and heart attacks.
This week in drug war history, December 11th, 1942. The Opium Poppy Control Act is enacted, making possession of the opium poppy plant or seeds illegal. December 12, 1995. Director Brown announces his resignation of head of the U.S. Office of National Drug Control Policy. December 14, 2001. President George W. Bush says, "If you quit drugs, you join the fight against terrorism." December 9, 2002. The Canadian House of Commons Special Committee on Non-Medical Use of Drugs releases reports that call for safe injection sites, pilot heroin maintenance programs, decriminalization of cannabis, among other reforms. December 13, 2002. A disabled, deaf, wheelchair-bound British charity worker returns home after spending 2 years in a primitive Indian prison after being found guilty of trafficking drugs, even though it was a physical impossibility. December 13, 2004. Hungary's Constitutional Court restricts the use of diversion to drug treatment for some drug offenders. This is Steve Nolan for the Drug Truth Network.
Welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. We've been talking a little bit about the marijuana legalization in Washington and Colorado. And one thing I've been thinking about, there's a big difference between Colorado and Mexico. In that between Texas and Mexico, there's this great big high fence. There are Border Patrol guys with machine guns going up and down and flying blimps over it. There are inspection points where they stop every car coming along the highway. You don't have any of those things between Colorado and New Mexico or Kansas. And the Constitution won't allow you to put them there. And we've already had complaints from the states because the medical marijuana from California and Colorado and Oregon and Washington has mysteriously somehow leaked across the border and showed up in other states. So I just don't see how you can combat good quality, cheap Colorado marijuana from chasing expensive, swaggy Mexican weed from the street corner.
Right. And now, what, Massachusetts, I believe, wasn't it, that they also passed medical marijuana?
They passed medical marijuana, and frankly, I wouldn't be surprised to see Massachusetts go to legalization in their legislature this year. I mean, after all, it was it 2 years ago or 4 years ago that they decriminalized, with probably the most lax decriminalization law in the country. If you're caught with up to an ounce of marijuana, you got a citation with a maximum civil fine of $100 and no criminal conviction. And they can ask for your identification to put on the citation, but they can't ask for any proof of the identification. One cop complains, "We're going to be doing nothing but writing tickets to Mickey Mouse at 123 Disney Lane." And their medical marijuana in this election passed by, gosh, something like 56% or something. So I wouldn't at all be surprised to see a legislative bill to legalize marijuana there this year. So who knows what's going to happen.
It just takes one domino to fall.
Yeah. I figured out, though, that I'm not going to use the domino image anymore.
Oh, really? Was it?
Yeah. We've had the first two fall. Mm-hmm. But the thing about dominoes is you have them nice, in a nice, neat row. You tip the first one, and in a very linear, smooth fashion, all of the others fall down in a very predictable pattern. And the problem is, now that these first two dominoes have fallen, we really don't know what the hell's going to happen. It could go a bunch of different directions. So it's hard to predict what the fallout's going to be, but it's not the nice, neat tipping of dominoes anymore.
Well, language that I've heard in like a marijuana movement have been things like, you know, you have to step forward and speak up. We can't stop. We can't hold your ground. And then it became, don't hold your ground. You've got to move forward. And I like that whole concept of it's moving forward, it's falling forward.
Well, the funny thing is, I'm kind of a relax and let it happen. Oh. That it's going to happen now. It doesn't take much more effort, and there's no sense stirring up the bad guys because they're going to be stirred up anyway. But I think the main thing is we want a lot of people to be able to see and realize that if you look at Colorado and Washington, nothing's happened. People are still going to be going to work. Kids are still going to be going to school and making their grades.
Right.
They're still going to play football. People are still going to drive safely and stop at the red lights and not have too many wrecks. Nothing's going to happen. And that's the key to the whole issue is
right.
There's nothing to be afraid of.
And like you said, reefer madness is a perfect example of people had that misconception that, oh, you start smoking weed and you're just going to go crazy, you're going to kill your partner, you're going to do this and that. And like you said, nothing's happening. So this reefer madness is not going around, and people are not going crazy, stirring up, you know, revolution or whatever. So that's the whole point, is that if people see that the legalization of marijuana is not going to create a crazy society, then people might say, well, what was the big thing about it that prevented us from making it legal in the first place?
And on the other side, it's not going to create a stoner society either.
Right.
You're not going to have people leaning back on the couch, watching cartoons on the tube and eating Twinkies all day long. People are still going to get up and go to work and go to school.
And Twinkies are coming back. Yes, sir.
Well, maybe there's an omen there we should think about.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, well, we're about to run out of time. Any last comments either one of you want to make about what you're doing or what's going on?
We do need people out there showing support, people to hold signs up when we're out there on the corner, maybe some to even man an info table, because we had people stop and actually park, get out of their car to come up to talk to us, and that was real exciting. We got a real show of support from being there just, you know, a few hours. But check the Facebook page, Houston NORML. We list the events there.
Okay.
And we'd like to see a little more.
And Houston NORML has a meeting once a month, don't
yes. This month's meeting is for members only because it's a Christmas social.
Okay.
But come January, we'll have a meeting place up there. And where they can come in.
And tell us again about your radio show.
The radio show, like I said, is called Polar Effect. It's going to be on locallivehouston.com every Friday from 3:30 to 5:30. It's going to be dedicated to the local metal bands of Houston, and also some of the political activism that's in the community.
Okay, and any particular focus on the political activism?
Well, a little bit of variety of different issues.
Okay.
Like I said, this Friday's we're going to dedicate it to the Sands Blockade, but we're going to bring in different causes and that affect our community.
Okay, now the Sands Blockade, does that include this Keystone Pipeline?
Correct. That's exactly what. Yeah, that's exactly what it's about.
Yeah. So, well, I'm sure a lot of people want to listen to it, and I want to remind everyone that in January, the Texas legislature convenes again for its biennial mischief. Keep your eye on them. We already know that they're threatening this drug testing of the poor who are looking for benefits. There may be some other activity of concern to you that comes up in the legislature. The main thing is to remember this. You hired them. They're supposed to be responsible to you for their actions. It's up to you to keep track of what they're doing. It's up to you to keep them in line and moving the right direction. And one of the best ways you can do this is to remind them that you may have hired them this year, but you're going to have a chance to fire them very quickly, and that you have a long memory. And the way you do this is through letters to them. Now, they pay attention to phone calls and emails, but the thing that really makes the difference is an old-fashioned letter written on paper and mailed through the postal system with a stamp on it. That makes the biggest impression. And they all have local offices in their district. You can go in and see them face to face and tell them what your concerns are and what you expect them to do. Remember this. Politics is much, much too important to be left to the politicians. It's the voters' game, and the voters are the ones that have to control it. And if you, as a voter, don't control what the government does, you're the one that suffers the consequences. So we're about to run out of time. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thanks to my guests that have contributed to this nice conversation. Follow them. They've got some interesting things going on. And we'll be back with another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics in 2 weeks. And let's keep it a secret. And it's not definite yet. But I have heard that next show we may be visited by Sativa Claus, who will help us find out who's been naughty, who's been nice. So, good night, and give our thanks to the people in Colorado and Washington.
Yes, sir.
We have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatories
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all. Remove the profit motive. If you remove the profit motive, you can do away with almost all these problems. And how do you do that? Simple. The end of prohibition, which can only mean one thing. Legalize drugs. Legalize oral drugs.
If we really want to improve our urban neighborhoods, the most important thing that we could do, the single most important